hello, listener, and welcome to Sleepy Echoes Unwind. I'm Echoes, and I've been waiting for you. I have a story I hope will help you drift away into the Spanish moss and sleepy secrets of the South. Come on in. Come in out of the evening air. The day is finally letting go, and dusk is settling deep into the magnolias. Go ahead and let the screen door creak shut behind you. You don't have to worry about a thing now. You're safe here. I've taken care of everything. Before we take this journey, let's just take a moment to breathe. Let all the worries of your journey drift away like fog on the bayou. Just a slow breath in and a long, slow breath out. Feel the tension leaving your shoulders. Let the sounds of the world outside fade into a gentle, distant hum. There's nothing for you to do but be here, to relax, and to listen. Have you ever held a memory so tight it started to feel more real than the present? A moment, a person, a single sharp regret that defines the edges of who you are. We all have them, ghosts that live inside us. They're the architects of our quietest moments, the curators of our deepest sighs. We build our lives around them, sometimes as monuments, and sometimes as prisons. But what if there was a way to put one of them down? Not to forget, but to release, to let it go so that you, in turn, could be let go. You know the kind of night I'm talking about, when the air goes still and the world outside your window sounds like it's holding its breath, remembering something. It's on nights like these, in the hushed corners of the world, that a certain story gets told. It's a whisper, a piece of folklore for the heartbroken and the lost. It's the legend of a train that only shows up at the edge of midnight, on a platform that isn't on any map. This isn't a train for travelers, not in the usual sense. It's a train for those at a crossroads, for those who feel deep in their bones that they can't take another step forward without leaving a piece of their past behind for good. This is the story of the last train to Dusk Junction. Now, I'm not saying I believe every story I hear, but this one has a way of finding people right when they need it most. The legend says the train doesn't really have a final destination, at least not one you could point to. Its purpose is stranger, more intimate. It's a journey of subtraction. To get on board, you don't buy a ticket with money. You buy your passage with a piece of yourself. A memory you just can't carry anymore. A name that tastes like ash on your tongue. Or a regret so heavy it has reshaped your spine. You offer it up, and in exchange, the train takes you one step closer to the person you were always meant to be. It's a phantom locomotive, a specter of progress, moving not across land, but through the landscape of a single human soul. Welcome to Sleepy Echoes Unwind, where the night remembers old stories. Tonight, we journey into a place where shadows linger and forgotten whispers rise with the dark. Now, light your lanterns, slow your breathing, and let us drift together into the hush of the night. Section 1. The Price of Passage and the Nature of Memory. The idea of a ghost train isn't new. It's a staple of folklore, a symbol of journeys cut short and histories that refuse to stay buried. But the train to Dusk Junction is different. It's not the ghost of some past tragedy, like those phantom wrecks said to replay their final moments. It's a quiet, deliberate force, a ritual, The legend says the station, Dusk Junction itself, only appears for those who are truly stuck. It's a place between worlds, lit by dim amber lanterns casting long, soft shadows. The air smells of petrichor, that scent of rain on dry earth, mixed with cold iron and something ancient, like ozone and forgotten time. The benches are worn smooth by decades of unseen passengers, each one waiting for their own departure. There's no schedule, no clock, just a feeling, a deep, resonant hum in the air that tells you something is coming. The price of the ticket is the heart of the legend. It's a supernatural bargain, but one that's rooted in a profound psychological truth. In many ways, we are our memories. The philosopher John Locke had a famous idea about this, that our personal identity is built from our consciousness, our ability to look back on our past thoughts and actions. From his point of view, you're the same person you were 10 years ago because you remember being that person. Your identity is a continuous thread of memories, a story you tell yourself about who you are. So what does it mean to give one up? To willingly cut a link in that chain? It sounds like a form of self-mutilation. And yet, we all know some memories become burdens. They stop being simple recollections and turn into active, malevolent forces in our lives. Psychologists have a term for this: rumination. It's the habit of replaying past mistakes over and over, an act that just digs the pit of regret and anxiety deeper. A memory can become a room you lock yourself inside. You know the layout by heart, every crack in the wall, every shadow in the corner. You know it's a prison, but the familiarity is a weird kind of comfort. Leaving it means stepping into the unknown, and that's terrifying. This is where the train finds you. It arrives for those who finally realize that the pain of staying has become greater than the fear of leaving. The cost of the ticket isn't just a memory. It's accepting that you can't change the past. It's an act of what some call radical acceptance. To offer up a regret isn't to pretend the mistake never happened. It's to forgive yourself for being human. It's to acknowledge you made the best choice you could with what you knew at the time. To offer up a name isn't to erase a person from history. It's to release the hold their ghost has on your present, to stop letting their absence define your presence. Psychological research often splits regret into two types: regrets over things we've done, and regrets over things we haven't done. It's that second kind, the inaction, the missed chances, that tends to haunt us longer and more painfully. These are the regrets that lead to that profound sense of being stuck. We're tormented by the endless branching paths of what if. The train to Dusk Junction, then, is a remedy for the ghosts of inaction. It doesn't change what happened, but it offers to quiet the endless echo of if only. It offers a finality that life so rarely gives us. It doesn't take you away from your life. It takes you to a place where you have to decide what you can no longer carry within it. It's a mechanism for turning a burden into a lesson. You step onto that platform not to run away from yourself, but to finally, truly, meet the version of you that's been waiting on the other side of the pain. And that is where the trouble and the transformation begins. Section 2. The Passenger's Stories. The Man Who Left a Name. Let me tell you about a man named Elias. He wasn't old, maybe 40, but his eyes had the kind of weariness you see in faded photos from a forgotten war. For 15 years, Elias had been haunted by a name: Clara. It wasn't a name he said out loud. It was a name he tasted with every bland meal, a name that echoed in the space between notes of a sad song, a name written in the condensation on a cold window. Clara had been the center of his world. They met in their early 20s, a whirlwind of shared dreams and clumsy, earnest passion. They built a life in a small apartment with mismatched furniture and shelves overflowing with books they swore they'd read together. He was a musician, and she was the one who believed in his songs before anyone else did. Her applause was the only audience he ever really needed. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was real, a sturdy, hand-built thing. And then it ended. Not with a dramatic explosion, but a slow, quiet erosion. Misunderstandings became resentments. Silences grew longer and heavier until they were the loudest thing in the room. The day she left, the sky was a flat, indifferent gray. She packed one bag, her hands trembling just a little as she folded a blue sweater he'd always loved. "I can't breathe here anymore, Eli," she'd said, her voice small, already distant. And he, choked by a pride he would curse for the next decade, just stood there and let her walk away. He didn't fight, he didn't plead. He didn't say the one thing that might have mattered. Stay. That single moment of inaction became his life's most profound regret. For 15 years, every choice he made was a reaction to that failure. He stopped playing music because every chord reminded him of a song he wrote for her. He moved from city to city, thinking he could outrun her ghost, but she was always there, a phantom passenger in the seat beside him. He had other relationships, but they were hollow, brittle things. He could never give all of himself, because the biggest part was still standing in that doorway, watching Clara's car disappear down the street. The name, Clara, wasn't just a memory of a person. It was the name of his failure, the name of the man he could have been. Holding on to it felt like a penance, the only way to honor the love he had so carelessly lost. The pain was the only proof he had left that she was ever real. One Tuesday in October, the kind of night where the wind sounds like it's telling secrets, Elias found himself just walking. He had no destination. He was just walking away from his empty apartment, from the silence that screamed her name. He walked for hours until the city lights gave way to sleeping suburbs, and the suburbs gave way to a road that narrowed into a path alongside a set of old, unused railway tracks. He didn't know how he got there. He just knew he was standing at a place that felt like the end of the line. And then he saw it. Further down the tracks, a soft amber light bloomed in the misty air. Not the harsh white glare of a modern engine. This was a warm, inviting glow, like a house full of candles was moving toward him. The air grew thick with the smell of coal smoke and damp metal. A low hum vibrated up through the soles of his shoes. There, on tracks he was sure had been abandoned for years, was a station. Dusk Junction. A simple wooden platform with a single empty bench under a gently buzzing lantern. It looked like it had been pulled from another century. As the train glided to a stop, its brakes hissing like a sigh, he saw it was as old as the station. Its iron body was a deep, midnight blue, its windows glowing with a soft, warm light. The doors slid open, revealing an interior that looked more like a cozy study than a train car, with plush velvet seats and small, polished tables. A figure emerged. The conductor. He was tall and impossibly thin, dressed in a crisp, dark uniform that seemed to drink the light around it. His face was a roadmap of fine lines, but his eyes were sharp and clear, the color of aged whiskey. He didn't look at Elias with pity or even curiosity. He looked at him with a calm, quiet understanding. "Evening," the conductor said, his voice smooth and low, like stones rolling in a deep river. bit of a walk to get here."
Elias just stared, his heart pounding against his ribs. He felt like he was in a dream he couldn't wake from. What is this place?
"It's a place for people who are carrying too much," the conductor replied, his gaze steady. "And you, sir, look like you've been carrying something for a very long time." The conductor stepped onto the platform. "The fare is simple. You can't take everything with you. There's a piece of your past you need to leave behind. A memory, a regret, a name. You offer it here, on this platform. It stays. You go." Elias felt a cold dread mix with a flicker of impossible hope. He knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, what the train wanted. The name. Clara. The thought of giving it up felt like being punched. It was his identity. His grief was the most consistent thing in his life. Who would he be without it? Forgiving himself felt like a betrayal of her memory. "I can't," Elias whispered, the words catching in his throat. "It's all I have left of her." The conductor nodded slowly. "Many feel that way. They believe the pain is the connection. But the connection is the love you felt. The pain is just the ghost of that love. It's the part that's keeping you from living. This train doesn't erase what was. It simply takes the part that's become a poison. It allows you to remember the love without the weight of the failure." Elias looked from the conductor's knowing eyes to the warm, inviting light of the open train door. He thought of the last 15 years, a gray, featureless landscape of loneliness and what-ifs. He thought about his guitar, gathering dust in a corner, its strings silent. He thought about the man he was before the silence in that doorway became his whole world. He was tired. God, he was so tired of being haunted. With a deep, shuddering breath, he closed his eyes. He pictured Clara, not as she was when she left, but on a sunny afternoon in the park, laughing with her head thrown back, the light catching in her hair. He held that perfect, beautiful memory. Then he let the other image rise. The closing door, the fading taillights, the crushing weight of his own silence. He let the regret fill him up, one last time. "Her name," he said, his voice cracking but clear. "I want to leave the name. Clara." He opened his eyes. The conductor held a small, old-fashioned ticket punch. He didn't take anything. He just nodded, and with a soft, punched a hole in the empty air. At that exact moment, Elias felt a sensation he could only describe as a loosening. A subtle shift, like a knot in his chest he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten it was there, had suddenly, gently, been untied. The name was still in his mind, but it had lost its sharp, cutting edge. It was just a word now, a memory, no longer a weapon he used on himself. The crushing weight of the regret tied to it was gone. "Welcome aboard," the conductor said, gesturing to the open door. Elias stepped onto the train. As the doors slid shut behind him, he looked back at the platform. For a fleeting second, he thought he saw a faint, shimmering outline of a man standing there, shoulders slumped, his face a mask of sorrow. A version of himself, left behind on the platform with the name. Then the train began to move, gliding silently into the deep, dark night. And Elias felt, for the first time in 15 years, that he was finally, truly, moving forward. He didn't know where he was going, but for the first time, he felt the quiet thrill of possibility. He was no longer a victim of his past, but a student of it. Section 3. The Passengers' Stories. The Woman Who Left a Regret. The train isn't always for those mourning a lost love. Sometimes, It comes for those mourning a lost self. And that's where we meet Amelia. Amelia was a cartographer of other people's lives. By day, a celebrated architect, designing sleek, beautiful buildings where families would grow and businesses would thrive. Her work was precise, logical, and acclaimed. She built worlds for others, but her own world was a fortress, built to protect a single, festering regret. In her youth, Amelia wasn't a woman of blueprints and right angles. She was a painter. Her hands were always smudged with cadmium yellow and ultramarine blue. Her tiny studio apartment was a chaotic symphony of canvases, turpentine, and light. She painted with a fierce, joyful abandon. Her work wasn't precise. It was alive, wild and emotional, full of color and movement. She had a gift, a raw, undeniable talent that had won her a coveted spot at a prestigious art institute in Paris. This was her dream. The acceptance letter felt like a key to the whole world. She could picture it all: a sun-drenched attic studio in Montmartre, long afternoons at the Louvre, evenings spent arguing about art and life with fellow painters over cheap red wine. It was the life she was meant to live. But she didn't go. Her father, a kind but deeply practical man, fell ill just weeks before she was supposed to leave. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious, requiring a long, slow recovery. He sat her down in their quiet suburban living room, his face etched with worry, not for himself, but for her. "You should go, Mia," he'd said, his voice thin. "Don't throw this away from me." But she saw the fear in his eyes. She saw her mother trying so hard to be strong, but fraying at the edges. And in that moment, a choice was made. Love and duty, two of the heaviest things we can carry, settled on her shoulders. She told herself it was a postponement, not a cancellation. She'd defer for a year. But 1 year became 2. Her father recovered, but life had laid down new tracks. She'd taken a drafting job to help with bills, and she was good at it. It was stable, safe. The passion for painting, once a roaring fire, was banked, its embers slowly cooling. She told herself the life of an artist was a foolish gamble anyway. She'd chosen the sensible path. She never picked up a brush again. The regret was a slow-growing poison. For years, it was just a quiet ache, a wistful what if. But as she got older, more successful in her career, the regret got louder. It became a bitter, mocking voice in her head. Every sterile, perfect building she designed felt like a tombstone for the artist she'd abandoned. Her success felt like failure because it wasn't the success her soul had craved. She was haunted not by a ghost, but by the vibrant, paint-splattered woman she had failed to become. One night, working late in her pristine, minimalist office, she was staring at the plans for a new museum. A museum where other people's art would hang. The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical pain. She walked to the large plate glass window, looking down at the city lights, and felt an overwhelming urge to just leave. Not just the office, but everything. The career, the accolades, the sensible, empty life she had so carefully constructed. She walked out of the building and into the cool night air, with no idea where she was going. She just walked toward the old, forgotten part of the city by the industrial canal, where the warehouses stood like sleeping giants. She found herself on a footbridge over a set of rusted railway tracks. The place was desolate, silent. And then she heard it. Not a roar, but a whisper. The soft, mournful whistle of a steam engine. In the fog swirling below, an impossible light began to glow. The air hummed. Down on the tracks, a station had appeared, its amber lights cutting through the gloom. Dusk Junction.
Drawn by a force she didn't understand, Amelia made her way down to the platform. The train was waiting, a dark shape against the mist, its windows warm. The conductor stood by an open door, his tall, slender form looking like a character from a forgotten fairy tale. "You look like you've lost your way," he said as she approached, his voice calm, without judgment. "I think I lost my way 30 years ago," Amelia replied, her own voice trembling. "And you've been carrying the map of that wrong turn ever since," the conductor finished for her. "Every single day." He explained the price of passage. He didn't need to. Amelia knew what she had to leave. It was the heaviest thing she owned. "My regret," she said, the words tasting of rust and sorrow. "The regret of not going to Paris." The conductor looked at her, and a flicker of profound empathy crossed his face. "That is a heavy one," he acknowledged. "Regrets of inaction are the hardest to put down. They're the ghosts of our ideal selves. To let one go, you have to be willing to forgive the person who made the choice. You have to accept that she did what she thought was right, out of love." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. For 30 years, she had been so angry at that young woman. Angry at her fear, her duty, her failure to seize her own life. She had never once thought about forgiving her. She saw the choice not as an act of love for her family, but as an act of betrayal against herself. "But she was a coward," Amelia whispered. "Was she?" the conductor asked gently. "Or was she a daughter who loved her father? The past can't be edited, but the present can be lived differently. The train doesn't give you back the life you didn't live. It gives you permission to start living the one you have now, free from the shadow of the other." He held up the ticket punch. "Are you ready to stop punishing yourself for a choice made from love?" Amelia closed her eyes. She pictured the young woman with the paint-stained hands and hopeful eyes. She saw her in that quiet living room, looking at her frail father. And for the first time, she didn't feel anger. She felt a wave of compassion. That girl hadn't been a coward. She had been kind. She had been loving. And she had been scared. And that was okay. "Yes," Amelia said, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I am." The conductor punched the air with a soft. For Amelia, the feeling wasn't a loosening, but a lifting. A great, invisible weight she hadn't realized was pressing down on her chest, her shoulders, her soul, simply dissolved. The anger, the bitterness, the 30 years of self-recrimination, they vanished. The memory of Paris was still there, but it was different now. It wasn't a painful what if. It was a sweet, nostalgic thought. A story about a young woman she used to know. A young woman she could finally love and forgive. Her 30 years of grieving for that lost girl were finally over. "Welcome aboard," the conductor said softly. Amelia stepped onto the train. She found a seat by a window, and as it pulled away from the Phantom station, she didn't look back. She looked at her own hands, resting on the polished table. They were clean, manicured hands, an architect's hands. But for the first time in 30 years, she didn't see them as a symbol of her failure. She saw them simply as her hands. And she wondered, with a small, budding excitement, what it might feel like to get them dirty again. Section 4. The Conductor's Revelation. Elias and Amelia sat in the same carriage, though they didn't speak. A few other passengers were scattered about, each lost in their own quiet world. A shared solitude hung in the warm, lamplit air. The train moved with impossible smoothness. No clatter of wheels, no jarring sway. Outside the windows, there was only a swirling, starless darkness that seemed to press against the glass. The journey felt timeless. It could have been minutes or days. Eventually, the conductor entered the carriage. moving with his usual silent grace. He stopped at their tables, pouring each of them a cup of steaming tea from a silver pot that seemed to appear from nowhere. The tea smelled of chamomile and something else, like cinnamon and forgotten afternoons. Elias finally found his voice. "Where are we going?" The conductor looked at him, then at Amelia, including them both in his answer. He took a seat at an empty table across the aisle. "You've been asking the wrong question since you stepped aboard," he said, his voice a low murmur. "You think of this as a journey from point A to point B, from a station of sorrow to a destination of peace. It's a natural assumption. It's how your world works." He paused. "But Dusk Junction isn't on a map, and its destination isn't a place at all. You haven't been traveling through space. You've been traveling through yourselves." He leaned forward slightly, his expression growing more intimate. "You think you left something on that platform. A name, a regret. And you did. But the train didn't destroy them. It didn't cast them into nothingness." He gestured to the dark window. "Dusk Junction is built from those offerings. Every abandoned sorrow, every released regret, every name given up with a final, shuddering breath. They become the foundation. The lanterns are lit by the embers of old passions. The benches are worn smooth by the weight of shed griefs. The mist is made of sighs. It is a library of human pain, but one where the books have all been read and lovingly put away. The stories are over." Amelia stared at him, her mind reeling. "So the things we leave, they're safe?" "They are honored," the conductor corrected gently. "They're given a home. The pain you carried was real. The love that caused it was real. To simply erase it would be a dishonor to your story. Instead, you chose to unburden yourself of the part that was holding you captive. You separated the mistake from your identity. The past is no longer a weapon you wield against yourself. It's just part of the landscape you've passed through." He looked directly at Elias. "You didn't erase Clara. You released the version of her that was defined by your failure. You're now free to remember the love, untainted by the pain of its ending." Then he turned to Amelia. "You didn't destroy the artist. You forgave the young woman who made a difficult choice. You're now free to discover if that artist still lives in you, without the bitter chorus of what could have been." This was the train's ultimate purpose. It wasn't an escape. It was a transformation. It was a way of reframing the past, of seeing it in a new light. "The train doesn't take you to a new place," the conductor said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It makes you a new person. The destination was never on a map, because the destination is you. A version of you that is learned, forgiven, and is finally ready to take the next step. You boarded this train believing you needed to go somewhere else to be happy. You'll disembark realizing you just needed to be someone else. Someone who is no longer at war with their own past." He stood up, his tall frame unfolding from the chair. "We'll be arriving shortly." "Arriving where?" Elias asked, bewildered. The conductor smiled, a faint, cryptic but kind expression. "Where you need to be." Conclusion and CTA. The train began to slow, its impossible silence giving way to the faint, familiar sound of steel on steel. Outside the windows, the inky blackness faded, replaced by the soft gray light of pre-dawn. Elias looked out and saw not some mystical station, but the familiar gritty landscape of his own city, just a few blocks from his apartment. Amelia looked out her window and saw the quiet, tree-lined street where she lived. The train wasn't pulling into a station, it was simply
stopping. The doors slid open with a gentle hiss. The air that drifted in was cool and real. It smelled of city dew and the promise of a new day. Elias and Amelia looked at the conductor, who stood by the open door. "This is your stop," he said. They stood, and as they walked toward the door, they felt lighter. Not just emotionally, but physically. The world seemed brighter, the colors more vivid. They stepped off the train and onto the solid ground of their own lives. They turned to say thank you, but it was already too late. The train was gone. The tracks were empty and silent, as if it had never been there at all. A phantom of folklore once more. They were left standing in the quiet dawn, two strangers who had shared an impossible journey. They looked at each other, a flicker of understanding passing between them, and then, with a small nod, they went their separate ways. Elias walked home, and for the first time in years, he didn't dread the silence of his apartment. He thought of his guitar, not with pain, but with a gentle curiosity. Amelia walked home, and as the sun began to rise, she found herself smiling. She was thinking about the color of the morning sky and about how she might try to capture it on a canvas. The story of the last train to Dusk Junction isn't really about a train. It's about the journey we all have to take, the one inside ourselves. It's about the profound and difficult truth that to move forward, we have to be brave enough to look back and choose what to set down. We can't erase our pasts, but we can change our relationship to them. We can choose to stop being prisoners of our regrets and instead become students of our experiences. We can learn that forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, is the key that unlocks the future. The train is a myth, a story told around a campfire. But the crossroads it appears at is real. We all find ourselves there at one time or another, standing on a platform of our own making, weighed down by the baggage of who we used to be. The legend says the train still runs. It appears in the quietest hours, on the loneliest nights, waiting for those who are ready. The train is arriving. What will you offer? What memory? What regret? What name are you holding so tightly? What piece of your past would you leave on the last train to Dusk Junction? Thank you for joining this moonlit journey. If you'd like to unwind with more tales each week, light your lantern and subscribe. For now, blow out your lantern. We shall meet again.